All right, well, welcome everybody. My name is Melissa Goff and I am the superintendent, and we're really glad to have you here tonight. We anticipate that we will have a lot to talk about, and we will start out by sharing a little bit of information with you just to make sure that we have common information regarding some changes we made to the hybrid return timelines. And then most of our meeting will be for you to ask us questions, and you can type them into the chat, or you can just ask your question in real time, whatever you feel most comfortable with. You're welcome to have your cameras on. We actually love to have your cameras on. And unless you have a poor connection and you want to have your camera off, no problem. We will go around and introduce ourselves first, so you know who from the staff is here to answer your questions. And we will start by introducing Lisa Harlan.
Good evening. Thank you so much for coming. My name is Lisa Harlan, and I'm the assistant superintendent here in GAPS. And I will just kick it to the person who's next to me on my screen, and that is Nurse Rachel.
Hi everyone, I'm Nurse Rachel. I am one of our district nurses and the district health coordinator for GAPS. And I'm going to send this to my next door neighbor on my screen is Stacy.
Hello, I'm Stacy Lee. I'm the curriculum coordinator for our district. And I will send it to Sue Luthra.
Hi, I'm Sue Lutheran. I'm the Director of Elementary Education, and I will pass this to Katie Albeck.
Hi, I'm Katie Albeck, and I help support early learning for our district. And anybody else we see? Not sure.
Miss Rayburn is here, and Mrs. Bradley.
And I see Tara is here, Tara Dixon. So we are likely to have staff members that are joining either as staff members or as parents, or just to be supportive staff members of those staff members who are trying to help answer your questions. So we are going to go ahead and jump into the very brief presentation piece, and then we will get into responding to your questions. And I see that we've got at least one, which is great, and feel free to keep adding those. So we wanted to make sure that we have some understanding of the hybrid calendars, the back to school timelines for students. We had changes for students in grades 3 through 8, basically. So any changes are highlighted in yellow on these calendars. You can also find these calendars on the district website, and they were emailed home to you as a message. But the elementary school timelines will be that on March 16th will be the last day of limited in-person instruction. So if you have students who are participating in limited in-person, March 16th will be the last day. March 18th and 19th, there will be no school for students in elementary, because those are the 2 days that our teachers will be preparing for the transition to hybrid. So most of our teachers, as you know, have been teaching from their homes. They are going to be going back into the schools, setting up their classrooms, moving over to preparing for students to be there in person. Then we have spring break. And then the Monday after spring break will be the first day of in-person hybrid for our students who are in kinder, first, and second grade. We wanted our littles to be there for the first day alone, so there's just not so much chaos as kids are arriving for them, and so that all of the adults in the building can focus their energies on the little kids. And then grades 3 through 5 will start the next day. April 2nd, which is the Friday of that first week back after spring break, is a grading day. So there will be no school for kids on April 2nd, because that's the day that their teachers will be filling out their grades. For our secondary students, so kids in middle and high school, our Albany Option School will start on March 29th. So the Monday after spring break, all the kids who attend AOS will begin school. On March 19th, before spring break, we will have two we'll have a grading day for our middle school teachers. So there will be no school for students in middle school the Friday before spring break, which is a week from tomorrow. Then we have spring break for everybody. The Monday and Tuesday after spring break are the 2 teacher preparation days for middle school teachers. So again, there's no school for students on March 29th or 30th. So if you have a middle school student, they are getting a longer spring break. They will have 3 additional days to their spring break time, actually, in order for grading to take place and for the preparation of teachers of their classrooms. Middle school students, 6th graders, will begin their in-person time on April 5th, and 7th and 8th graders will start the next day on April 6th. The rest of the timeline stays the same in that on April 9th will be the grading day now for high schoolers, which was already on your calendar. The 12th and the 13th will be the 2 days that high school students don't have classes because their teachers are preparing for hybrid in-person instruction. The 15th will be the first day of school for 9th graders who have the last name that begins with A through L. And then the next day will be the first day of in-person hybrid for 9th graders with the last name that starts with M through Z. And then April 19th will be the first day with all of the in-person kids at the high school in their high school schedule. One of the questions that we've had come up pretty frequently is, what if my student is absent? And oftentimes this is associated with my student was exposed, so they need to stay home, but they're not sick. So they're in quarantine, but my student's not sick and they're in-person learning. What do they do? Well, it's different for elementary students and secondary students. So if your child is in elementary school and they are staying home but feel well enough to do schoolwork, then they can join another teacher's distance learning class for the day that they are home. So they will be assigned a teacher's class to be able to get into on that day that they are home, or for the days that they are home. If your student, though, is in middle school or high school, because of the way that their schedules work, and teachers are pacing on different timelines, if your student is absent, but they're still feeling well at home, they're just going to follow the exact same protocol that they would have followed during regular in-person school pre-COVID, which is to let the teacher know that they're gone and ask the teacher to send them homework, and they'll do that work at home. But they will not be participating in distance learning because the distance learning teachers are actually teaching at a different pacing than the teachers who are in person. And that is the whole presentation that we had. So pretty fast. So we should be able to answer a lot of questions during this time. And I'm really happy to see we've got so many folks here on the call. I'm going to ask Assistant Superintendent Harlan to do the drill with me here, where we get through as many questions as we can during the time that we are all together.
Great. So one of the things I'll ask communications to do is to go ahead and put the schedules for elementary, for middle school and high schools linked in that, because we've gotten questions on that. So you can just find that in the chat and click the link so you have it available. And then we will just get started. So the first question is, when will middle school go for more than 2 days a week? So great question, Jen. Thank you for that. The reason it's only and middle school, just to be really clear, middle school is going 4 days a week, and there are AM sections, AM cohorts or PM cohorts. So that's true of all K-8. It's high school that goes all day, either Monday, Thursday, or Tuesday, Friday, depending on their last name. And I think the real crux of the question is, why are kids either going in the morning or afternoon or 2 days a week? Why is there this limit? And so right now, the requirements for schools to open, there are 2 pieces. One, it's the 6 foot distance. So you can only have desks or students at tables, and they have to be 6 feet apart. So just the physical limitation of the space, we don't have the space to have 30 kids in a classroom like we normally would. And so that's why. The other is that you have to have 35 square feet per person in a room. And so that's also a limiting factor in terms of space. So it's not that we don't want kids back, and it's not that we don't want them all to be back as much as possible. But the requirements that we have right now have 35 square foot per person and 6 feet of space. And so that's why we can only have about half at a time. Sarah asked, so there were some questions that I tried to answer in the chat that I could answer quickly just by typing. Sarah asks, is the EBT card sent out again by mail, or will it be issued to the card already sent? And I said, I'm not sure. I really want to check with food service first. I think it will just be issued to the card already sent, but I want to double check that. And then Christy asked that she read there were COVID tests in schools. Are those nasal tests or another kind? So the requirement was that we have tests available and they are self-administered nasal swabs. And Nurse Rachel can talk a little bit more about that. But they're not required that your child is tested, but we are required to have them available for staff and students.
So if your student has symptoms at school that align with our COVID primary symptoms, so fever, chills, cough, shortness of breath, difficulty breathing, or new loss of taste or smell, if your student has a consent form on file, the schools will be sending out those consent forms to you soon if you haven't received them already. If you send that back with your student and they have symptoms, then there's the option for them to get tested at school. They're rapid tests. They are self-administered, so it does mean your student has to stick the swab and circle it in their nose, and then stick it in the other side and circle it in that side. And then they'll hand it back, and then you get results within 15 minutes. So it's just one factor that OD has included to try to help us reduce the risk of bringing back schools to in-person and to help with testing in the community.
The one thing it's not like the, I don't know if anyone had a COVID test earlier on where it was like, it touched your brain. It was so deep. It's not that one, but it still is a nasal swab.
So Jen asked if it was possible to still volunteer in the classroom if you've received the COVID vaccinations. And Lisa responded to that right now we don't have volunteers allowed. And the reason that we don't have that is back to what Lisa was talking about. We have a limitation to how many people can be in a room at any given time. And so we literally don't have space for any volunteers, even if they're fully vaccinated. And even if the Oregon Health Authority said we could allow volunteers, we don't have the physical space yet for that to happen. When and if those space changes occur, then we will communicate with you and let you know when we can have volunteers participate.
So the next question, Violet asks, for the distance learning and in person, which one is going to be more advanced? And I'm assuming that Violet means maybe with curriculum. Do you want to tackle this, Melissa?
Yeah, sure, of course. So our goal for learning for our students has been that whichever option students choose, they will still be able to be addressing the same standards and have the same enriching experience that they would in the classroom, but the learning approaches will be different in person than if you're completely engaged in distance learning. And so the question about which will be more advanced, I would say neither will be more advanced than the other. And your child may perform better in certain settings. So you may feel things are different if they're at home versus if they're at school in how your student engages. So you may see a difference there. But as far as what teachers are covering, they're lesson planning together still. So there is not a difference in the quality of what will be delivered by the teachers and supported by the teachers. Will there be track, field, or additional sports at the middle school level this spring? I saw primarily the high school sports info. And Lisa, I'll let you take that one.
Yeah, so I would say at this point that has not been determined. The guidance that we've gotten really is around K-12 sports, focused at the high school level and focused on, they have abbreviated seasons and than they would typically have. So for instance, track is much later than it would typically be and for a shorter amount of time. So at the middle school level, that isn't something that we have determined yet, but are super open to being able to involve kids in kind of all of those things that they would typically do, and is often the thing that makes schools fun. So still more to do there and not sure. Kristen asks, I heard the 6th graders are losing office hours with their teachers. How will they get help during that time? So one of the things, there will be office hours available, but it might not be with their specific teacher, right? So having office hours where they can get adult help if they need will be important, but you're right, it won't necessarily be that specific math teacher or their own English language arts teacher. And so I think a few things will be really important. One, totally use office hours. The folks who are there will be able to help you with what you need, whether that's understanding something or just sometimes like, let's read through the directions again and make a plan for how we're going to tackle a project that just seems bigger sometimes. And in order to have 2 cohorts of kiddos at the middle school level in an AM and PM section, yeah, I mean, we weren't able to have do now. That is true. Different at the high school level because they're going 2 full days a week. And part of that conversation to determine that too was around siblings, was around parents who have kids at multiple schools. It's high schoolers are more independent than obviously middle schoolers and elementary. So yeah.
The next question is, when can my middle schooler participate in band in person?
Well, so part of that will have to do with kind of what's offered at their school, what that looked like before. But I don't, and hopefully as the guidance kind of progresses and the requirements are lessened, some of that can change. I don't think in the hybrid schedule, they'll still have, but I think it will be virtual in the afternoons. I would have to check at each of the middle school levels. Our hope is that as we get back to more normal, in terms of being able to have more students than every 6 feet or more students than 35 square feet, that schedules will look a little bit more normal, but we're not sure. We know another update for our guidance comes out on March 19th, but I can't answer that because I don't know. I don't know what that will look like or how that will change things.
So this next question I'm going to ask Rachel and Sue to weigh in on. So question from my 3rd grader, can we use the playground?
And principals can chime in too. So playgrounds are open and they're open after school. They've opened already, right? And they opened after school, but we're not going to mix cohorts and groups of kids. So it might be that your child gets to use the playground like at some part during the day, or maybe some schools it's different because they can use it like every other day or things like that, because we have to give, we can't have everybody out there together. Recess won't be the same as far as like all the 1st and 2nd and 3rd graders go out there and play together. We're not going to mix groups and cohorts together. So your school will look a little different depending on the size of your school and the size of your playground. But the playgrounds are open after school and they are open and they will be, you know.
And Rachel, are they safe?
They are. So we've been told by the CDC and ODE and OHA that actually playgrounds don't require disinfecting. But if our students do go out to play on playgrounds, it is a requirement that they wash or sanitize their hands before and after. So ideally, the students will be able to go outside, play with their cohort that they've been with that day to be able to keep the distances with other groups, sanitize their hands, go back in and keep learning. So that's the plan, at least for the playgrounds.
So here's a question. I don't know if we have one of the high school principals on, but the question is, Q3 for high school was previously listed as April 15th with no school on the 16th for grading, but now the grading day shifted, and this was a little bit ago, to April 9th. What is the last day for students to submit homework for 3rd quarter? And I hesitate to answer that simply because it may be different depending on which school you go to, but Assistant Superintendent Harlan went to unmute, so she may feel confident in the answer.
No, I was going to say I would have them ask their teachers, right? Because they'll tell students, hey, the last day to turn in either your work or any late work is kind of this day. So I would make sure your students ask your teachers.
Also, Jean Gritter here, posted the link to the West Albany transition to hybrid schedule with all that information in. I don't know if it's the same for South, but there is a link in the chat now for West.
Thanks, Jean. And then Tammy, when I said this, I realized I misspoke. Pacing really wasn't the right word. So it was mentioned that the middle school distance learning will be going at a different pace than the hybrid classes. How much of a difference in curriculum is being taught between the two options? So there's no difference in curriculum. What I meant is that teachers, they're in elementary school, they're going to really be teaching pretty much the same thing the same day. So the distance learning, when kids stay home, it's going to be easier for them to get into another teacher's classroom. That fluctuates. As a middle school and high school teacher, I can tell you that how I anticipate moving forward in any given day can be slightly different. And so it's not as easy for a high schooler to then shift into a different high school teacher's class who's teaching the same thing. That's all I meant. They're still covering the same materials, and they may cover the materials in a different order because of teacher preference. So that could be a difference as well. So sorry for that confusion. I knew it when I said it. Jen, is there any chance of summer school? Yes, absolutely. And this summer we are working on a very robust summer experience for students with a variety of opportunities for kids that are more flexible. One of the takeaways that we have from distance learning is the flexibility that we have all needed to work under, that we can also take forward into the work that we do moving forward. And so we're looking at a number of options that are flexible for kids and have both academic options, but also have enrichment options for students as well, and looking at how we can really add a lot more transportation so that parents aren't feeling that they can't get their students to some of the options that we will offer during the summer. And my mouse is not working well, so I can't scroll down below what Jen said there. Thanks.
I got it. So Chelsea asks, will the buses still be delivering lunches for CDL? And we will have food sites open for those who are choosing CDL to come pick up, but we won't have buses available to deliver lunches because they will be transporting students. So unfortunately, no, we won't. Sarah writes, with the requirements being relaxed slowly and teachers being vaccinated, can the children have recess PE lunch together? And can there be more children in the classroom so they're in class more hours during the day? I know you've put a lot of effort into all of this and I really appreciate it. It's just really hard because 3 hours a day and no social activities is really not what we were hoping for when the kids go back, and almost more difficult for parents that work. So I don't get why they can't have recess outside. So they can have recess outside and they will have recess outside. It will just be kind of with their cohort. So you're not going to see them have recess with all of the K-5 students after lunch, for example. Or so they'll have all of those things, but it will be within their cohort. And you might see, you know, these two cohorts are going to play on this play equipment or on this side of the playground, and the older kids on another side. It might look something like that. We do anticipate, as things progress, that the requirements that we have to figure out will change. They have, we call it the Rssl Guidelines. In it, it's an 88-page document that has requirements and recommendations. We're on the 5th version of that document, and we expect the 6th version to come out March 19th. Every time that happens, we have to adjust and say, okay, what does that look like? So as that continues to adjust, we will continue to adjust. So if we don't have to have 35 square feet per student, we'll adjust. If we don't have to have the 6 feet, but it goes to something else, we'll adjust. So absolutely, our goal is to get as many kids in as much time as possible as kind of that allows. I don't know how many people realize some of the things that are required. I think people hear, you know, the governor or folks say, oh, schools are open now. And you're like, yes. And here is some light bedtime reading around the requirements that still have to be in place in order to do that. But we're looking forward to that happening. And even given kind of the requirements we have, kids will still be playing and kids will have recess outside and they'll still be moving. And we're super excited about that. So
I would just add that when those rules change, and I agree with Assistant Superintendent Harlan, they're going to change, and we will, I think, progressively get more and more opportunities to have more students together. And all I would ask is that you guys understand that we can't change the practice overnight. So it takes us a bit of time to be able to reconstruct then who teaches which students. And part of the challenge when those numbers change is your child could end up with a different teacher. We may have some students who have been in person, but when those rules change, their parents now want them to instead stay in distance learning because their parents may not feel as comfortable. So every time that we see a shift, and 5 versions isn't exactly right, because every time they change it, they do a 5.0 and then they do a 5.1 and a 5.2, and we are on version 5.6 of these instructions. And every time we work to pivot as quickly as we can so that students get the maximum benefit from the change that we have. So just to give you a little more context for that. Great question, Jen. Will kids be using their computers the full day they are at school, or is it just used for some of the work? So they will use it every day that they're at school, but not the full day that they're at school. So yes, they will use it, but no, not for the full day.
right. And when they're at school, they'll be there with their teacher, and learning will look kind of live and conversation and all of that. Some of the things that have been really helpful, especially I think at the secondary level, I know this is true for me in our family, just having like all of the assignments and a way to turn in work electronically, things like that have been really helpful. And I imagine that kids will still be turning work in kind of online through those systems. And so having their technology with them will be really helpful, but they won't be sitting in a classroom watching a screen and a teacher teaching on a screen. It will be kind of live, real school.
Okay, so there's a question of what day does comprehensive distance learning start? And I'm going to direct you to the district main page, and I think that Andrew may have put a link into those calendars already once. But if you get onto that main page, you can see the entire schedule for hybrid and in-person for elementary and for middle and high school. So take a look at that, and that will tell you specifically for the grade levels you're looking at.
So I scrolled down to the next question. There were some that were answered and then some links people put in. Thank you for that, Jean. And Danielle asks, are we assigned AM or PM schedule, or do we choose? And if so, where do we go to make the choice? So we do choose, and it's based on some questions that they would ask regarding transportation and the like. I would encourage you at this point to call your school, to call and ask and say, you know, hey, I would like my child, whatever school, to attend the AM cohort. We do need transportation, or no, we don't. Can they attend the PM? But I would call your school office. Jen seconds Greta's question around Chromebooks. I think we answered it, but yes, we agree. Dale HD, when will an update food site schedule be published? I would need to check. I thought that was already up to date, and I'm wondering if you mean for the school sites that will have lunches available during hybrid for CDL students to pick up, and that we should have before spring break. So if I think that's probably the question, and if that's what you mean, it should be soon here.
Alicia asks, I thought RSSL guidelines were recommended but not mandated, but I may be wrong on that one. You are right and you are wrong. So a bunch of what's in the RSSL is required, and then a bunch is recommended. And part of what you saw since the governor's announcement, just even since the governor's announcement and then through the board meeting and the change of the calendar, was us going back to the RSSL against what the governor's announcement had been, in conversation with the Department of Education and what's anticipated changes there. But yeah, that the reason it's really hard is with every version that comes out, new things move oftentimes from required and they become recommended. So there are rules that in January were required, but now in March are recommended. And that's part of why you see us navigating and having challenges with making sure that we are meeting the required pieces. And it's confusing when that happens. And when there are 88 pages of that, yeah, it would be really confusing, I think, if you were a parent and weren't looking at those things all the time, because it's even hard for staff as we navigate.
Christy asks, how are cohorts going to work with Spud? I can take that.
Take that one. Do you want me to take that?
Sure. Go ahead, Rachel.
So we've had a lot of conversations with our Spud staff talking about what that looks like. We know that in the current iteration of RSSL, it's required that students only interact with up to 100 people during their educational week. So we've accounted that into what that looks like for classrooms, and making sure with our Spud students that they would never hit that above 100 student mark. So what will happen is if they join a new group of students, or if a group is pulled out from different groups, that counts as a cohort, which matters if someone tests positive. So if someone tests positive and you've been in a cohort with that individual, or your student has been, then that's what would count as a cohort. They would have to stay home because they've been exposed. But if you were not in that cohort directly with that individual, then it doesn't count as an exposure and it wouldn't count as part of your cohort. So with Sped, the big thing that we've worked out is just to figure out numbers in terms of making sure that we're below that 100 person mark.
So I'll take the next one. Katie asked what, and this is one of our most asked questions, Katie. So thank you for putting it in here. I appreciate it. We probably should have answered it up front, but what is behind the decision to make 14-day quarantine for out-of-state travel a requirement when the governor lifted that and now it is a recommendation? Out-of-state travel for sports is okay, but not for spring break family vacation travel. It's okay. We have worked it all out. Just wondering what the logic is. Great question. So what we work with on this is we look at the travel advisory for the state of Oregon, and right now, and things where you're correct, under a requirement and a move to recommendation, and essential travel was defined, and the definition for essential travel changed within the last 2 weeks to add to essential travel for athletics. So prior to 2 weeks ago, traveling for athletics was not included as essential. So prior to 2 weeks ago, we were still saying even for athletics, it's that 14-day quarantine. When athletics became listed under essential, then we honored the essential, what we've been doing with essential travel. To the question about why are we holding to 14 days? Because we rely upon, and RSSL requires that we consult with, we rely upon our partners at Lynn County and at Benton County Public Health, and they are still recommending the 14 days. They think that is the safest thing for students and families and staff. And so we are going to go with the most conservative from our local health experts on what they recommend that we do. And I know that that doesn't make everybody happy, but that is the decision that we've made. And if those recommendations from them change, then we'll be paying attention to that as well so that we can adapt and adjust. The schedule I received from my elementary school 2 days ago has no time for recess or PE. That's from Sarah. And I'm not, go ahead, Lisa.
Yeah, I would answer, and I would also let Sue. I don't know that they listed out what recess looks like because they're going out by class, like in their classroom, right? So they wouldn't have necessarily said, oh, they're going to have recess at this time or this time. I'm fine to open it up to Sue or to the other elementary principals if they had a more specific answer.
Lisa, I do know that some schools, rather than having a recess break and going outside, they're providing kind of like the brain breaks within the classroom. I think I did hear of some principals doing that. So there would be a sense of time to interact and get some physical activity in there without having to take the time, since it's a 3-hour time. So I do know that some schools are doing that, but there would always be some sort of a physical movement brain break activity during that time instead.
Thanks. And we answered Violet's question, but just to make sure, the AM PM schedule is just for kinder through 8th grade, and then the 9th through 12th grade students at the comprehensive high schools are every other day.
I think the next question is, will kids get a list of what they need to bring to school, and will their teachers cover what they should expect for their school and classroom? You know, we're really just asking kids to bring like their basic supplies. We understand that at the beginning of the year, many families bought school supplies, and so aren't, you know, asking for parents to repurchase or purchase additional supplies. But literally, I would say, you know, pencils, paper, a spiral or two, and we'll make sure that we have what they need when they get there. Julia or Sue, have there been, I know that like for middle school, they were working on like a very basic supply list that is essentially that, to just say, hey, here are things to remember to bring. And I think elementary was as well. I see.
At elementary, we purchased it, and we purchased stuff for kids to keep so they could just keep it on their desk, have it their own personal, because in typical years, they bring it and they all share it. And we have bins of pencils and stuff like that. We're not going to share right now. So we purchased some things that are individual to keep at their space. And I think I saw a couple schools had a few things you could bring, but we're trying to lighten the load on parents a little bit and have that for you. But I see some teachers and some principals on here if you want to.
Yep. So at the elementary level, so that kids can have their supplies just to themselves, they'll be provided, and they can keep home supplies at home because they'll also need them during the days that they're there.
Rachel, here's a question for you. For the people in sports, if they go on vacation, would they get tested or have to show proof that they got tested?
That's a great question. So if you travel outside of the state for non-essential reasons, even if you fit those other groups, like say maybe sometimes you travel and it's for work, which is essential, but then other times you travel for recreation, when you come back, if that trip itself was considered fun or recreational or non-essential, you would have to quarantine regardless of if you were also an athlete or something like that nature. The testing part, we have testing available for athletics if you're symptomatic and have a consent form on file, much like we do for the schools. And that was a requirement for us to start football when we started because we were in a higher risk category. So we do have that type of testing available. But if they travel out of state and it's for athletics and they come back, there isn't any testing required to restart.
Thank you, Rachel. So Jen says, please make sure that on nice days, kids get a chance to go to the playgrounds. I know my kid has missed that. The brain breaks might be a letdown to some kids who think they will get recess on the playground. And I really appreciate that. And we will communicate that back again, you know, to our principals. I think part of the challenge that they're running into at some of the schools is how long it takes them to get out to the playground and back in from play when the kids only have the 3 hours of learning time together within the classroom. And so they're weighing those challenges. Certainly we'll bring that back, and it doesn't hurt for you to just send a quick message to your teacher about the fact that you value that. Again, part of it is just the academic time is so limited. Jill has a pro tip, which I adore. Pro tip for elementary families. We've been able to have Zoom calls with our teachers during office hours and have been walked through what to exactly expect in a school day. Our school has communicated a lot, but having this personal conversation helped so much. Highly recommend that. That's a great approach. Thanks, Jill.
I would say, especially for kiddos who are, and I don't even want to say unsure, but I think kiddos are excited, but they're also kind of nervous and anxious. They might be a little scared. It's just, there's a lot of emotions kind of wrapped up in a big old ball. And so I think for them to know kind of exactly what it looks like, and then also to be able to ask questions. You know, kids oftentimes have questions that I could never think of or even dream to even ask. And so just having an opportunity for them to ask some questions or get an idea about what it will look like, I think will be really helpful for kids to just start to imagine before they get there what they can expect.
Yeah, for sure. Sarah, I thank you, Sarah. I know you're trying and I appreciate everything you're doing, but the children need to be outside, period. And that would be better for COVID, correct? And yes, we agree. And it would be fantastic if it would be fantastic if there weren't limitations, right? We have these competing interests as we get the kids back to school, and we also value kids having outdoor play. It's really important, and it's important for their time with their peers. And yeah, we agree. So we're going to continue to work hard on what we're able to do there. Oh my goodness. And we are at the end of our questions right now.
I think we caught up. Yeah. So if you felt like a little overwhelmed or felt like there were too many questions in the chat, they'll never get to my question, feel free to pop on now and type your question, or feel free to unmute if you want and you have a question you feel comfortable and just ask your question. I'm trying to use my good teacher wait.
Well,
I just can't believe. Oh, good
while
job.
we're waiting, let's wait. I'm going to let Jen's I'm going to let some population of the questions happen. Nurse Rachel, could you talk about what appropriate masking will look like, what masks are expected at school?
Sure. So there's a lot of flexibility in masks, but one requirement, the real key requirement, is that it needs to be at least 2 layers. Most of our masks that you can get at the store that you make yourself already are 2 layers, so that they would meet that perfectly. There are a couple things that aren't allowed for masks though. And so if they're gaiters, the ones that you can pull up and pull down really easily, those are not going to be allowed in school unless you're wearing, maybe your student really likes the gaiter and they wear another mask underneath and then a gaiter over top. Sure. We've heard that exception from at least one person before, but just a gaiter by itself is not an option. And then same with if you see masks that have exhalation valves or vents. So the ones with the little thing kind of in the corner here that lets the air out, those also don't count as masks that can be worn at school. So big key things are 2 layers and no exhalation valve or vent, no gaiters, no lace ones that you can like see through or breathe through. Those are all really key. And if your student loses their mask, gets their mask really wet or dirty, or it rains really hard that day, we have backup masks available in school for them. So that's not a problem at all.
Thank you. All right. So we have new questions. Will all schools be sending out schedules? Great question.
So at first I started to type this back and then I thought, wait a second, I should make sure I am understanding the question correctly. So the schedules and things like that, yes, they're available and they're on the website. For student schedules, for high school, I think their student schedule will be available to them kind of through Canvas. For middle schools, because middle school is starting earlier now, they're actually having to kind of redo some of their schedules, and it will take them a while to basically reschedule all of these students in their kind of new master schedule. So be patient with the middle schools. It might be right before students start because they're having to redo those.
Yeah.
Greta asks, I missed the answer on devices at school. I see benefits for middle school and up, but elementary. So yes, please have your student take their device to school and back. There are several reasons. When kids are in school, they're going to be learning from their teacher. But some of the things in terms of like the links to some books that you can read or that will read to you, or the ability to turn in homework, things like that, we want the devices available to them so that if there's something they start in school, maybe they're writing about something, that they'll have that when they go home as well. But I've heard some people say, well, kids are just going to go in school and then they're just going to be learning like on a screen because the teacher is going to be somewhere else. And you're like, nope, they're going to be in a classroom with other kids and a teacher. But yes, it will be helpful for them to have their technology with them. Nicole asks, when will we find out bus schedules? We've called schools, district offices, transportation, and no info. So we will have that available for sure during the week of spring break. I know they're still working on routing, but if you have questions about specific stops, there's actually some information that went out, I think tonight, and if not tomorrow, to parents for how they can look up like this. You can put in, this is my address, where's the nearest stop, like where's our bus stop and at what time. And Sue, help me remember, is it called Transportation 360 or 360 Transportation, something like that? So,
it's called Ride 360. Lisa, it's going to be sent by schools next week. We just finished the communication today and it's going to be sent out by the schools on Monday.
Awesome. Thank you, Andrew. I knew it was something about Transportation 360 and I had just seen the communication. So thank you for that. But it'll allow you to look, and for sure, you'll be able to call and get that information if you wait probably about another week. Kristen asked the same question about kids' specific schedules. Again, for middle school, that will be delayed. It will be before they go back, but it might be right before. High schools, they'll be able to see. And actually, I think a lot of high schoolers may already know, because based on what their Q3 classes were, their Q4 are going to be the other ones in their semester block. Sarah, so they need 2 masks? No, I have not heard this at all. What does 2 layers mean then? Nurse Rachel, what is a 2-layer mask?
So I'm sorry if I led to more confusion on this. So it just means that it has to have 2 layers of fabric. That's all. And I think it's actually hard to find a mask that's not a 2-layer mask at this point. So it's just one in the front, one in the back, and almost every commercially made mask is a 2-layer one, and same with masks you would make at home. So it doesn't mean 2 masks. It just means 2 layers of fabric.
Oh, thanks, Nurse Rachel. So
Melanie.
Oh, you go.
So Melanie says, we've not received an official statement about which cohort. Should we be concerned that registration isn't right? He is in high school, so we know which cohort. So no, you shouldn't be worried about it. Yeah, if you know which cohort you've got it. He's going to be just fine. All right. Lori asks, can student bring their own hand sanitizer to school? Does there need to be a certain percentage of alcohol in it? Which is of course, it's the right question. And I just haven't ever seen someone ask, does there have to be a certain percentage of alcohol in what I send with my student to school? Yeah, that's ironic.
Nurse Rachel.
I know this one. I'm prepared. I've been studying my Ready School Safe Learners. It has to be at least 60% alcohol
60.
To be considered appropriate hand sanitizer, according to the Ready School Safe Learners.
Thank you. I thought it needed to be 70, so I would have advised you wrong. All right, Danielle, is there any option to not take devices back and forth? We have devices at home that I'd rather not have them slug back and forth in a backpack, but would they be able to store a school issued device on campus? So I believe the answer to that is yes, that they could do that. We just want to make sure that they have a device at home and a device at school. And so if your device at home is something that you can see it not necessarily being able to be fully utilized by them, then please have them take the device from school back and forth. But I think I see Stu maybe correcting me.
Well, and please know that we'll have at least 3 devices per classroom available for students to use in the instance that something happens to theirs, someone's isn't charged, or and so there will be devices for kids to use if you have one at home. They don't want to check one out, but they'll need one to use at school.
And I just want to clarify that the person asking the question meant that you have a personal one at home that you'd like to keep at home, and then a school one, because we wouldn't have enough for our children to check out a school one for a district one for home and a different district one for school.
Yep. Yep.
Yeah,
And
good point. I assumed that. Yeah.
Yep.
Just to confirm, oh wait, sorry, I skipped one. Do you have any info on how many teachers have been vaccinated currently and how many will be vaccinated by the time in-person school starts? So thanks for asking that question. We can't ask people if they've been vaccinated because they have a right to privacy. However, we did do a survey ahead of time prior to vaccinations being scheduled. That was anonymous to ask staff members if they had been vaccinated and then if they were planning to be vaccinated or if they were going to choose not to be vaccinated. Our staff, in replies there, we had 88% of our staff who said that they were planning to choose to be vaccinated. What we also know is that we have provided two really large opportunities for staff to be vaccinated. One was a smaller group for our staff who were our most fragile staff. And they had an opportunity to be vaccinated at the district office ahead of the time period that Lynn County Expo Center got set up and was open for our teacher day for teachers to be vaccinated. So the rest of the staff really took advantage of the teacher few days that they had prioritized at Lynn County. And then Lynn County was fantastic about scheduling appointments for that marker of 4 weeks afterwards. And so we believe that 88% have now been vaccinated, and we are in the first of the 2-week waiting period post-vaccination until those vaccines are fully activated. Is that accurate, Rachel? Okay, awesome. Just to confirm for middle school, 4th quarter starts the 29th online, and then they return in person on the 5th or the 6th. Yes.
And then Andrew linked in the chat so that they could.
Perfect. Sarah, I feel like teachers being vaccinated was a major barrier to the children going back to normal school. So if teachers are vaccinated, can the rules be loosened if the parents agree and feel their children are safe going back to school? Sarah, that's a good question, but we can't ask the teachers if they've been vaccinated. So there's just no way to make that work. And the reality is we don't have a requirement for staff to be vaccinated. And so there's no way that is going to be the solution. The reality is that students are still vulnerable. They're not going to be vaccinated. And so rather what we're looking to is the health authority changing some of their restrictions. And we do think they're going to be able to do that. And we think we'll have more opportunities for our students based on that.
Yeah, and I would say, one of the things, we actually don't make the rules. So I think the misnomer that there aren't requirements that schools have to follow, there are. And I think some of the other input people have is, well, just because there are requirements, what would happen if you didn't follow them? And so we're not in a position to not follow those requirements because a lot of our either risk or our insurance is dependent upon the fact that we are following the requirements. And so we don't make those rules, and we continue to adjust as they continue to adjust, and they will continue to, I'm sure.
We'll get to Gabby's, but Sarah says she's more concerned with her child's emotional health, which is at an all-time low, being stuck at home. And we're concerned about students' emotional and mental health as well. What we really want is for students to be back in school as quickly as they can be. We also, if your child is experiencing lows and you haven't yet contacted the school and let them know, please do that, because we do have resources through our partnerships with Trillium and Lynn County Mental Health and staff that do outreach and try to connect with our kids. So just wanted to make sure that you know that. And then there's a question.
I would want to add one thing. The mental health of our students and our staff are a huge concern to us. So much so that we've actually partnered with lots of different organizations to try and get out different resources and be able to reach students. That's why we have limited in person with about 1,300 students in small groups specifically for some of those concerns. And so we agree that this is not the most ideal at all, and that being stuck at home, absolutely. I mean, my own kids feel that way. I certainly do as well. And so we're really excited to get kids back, and we'll be even more excited to be able to get them back more and longer, and get back to some semblance of, you know, what normal is, or what we imagine normal to be.
So Rachel, Costco sells masks. They believe it's called the 32 degree, the brand. Not sure if you're familiar with those at all, but they seem to be like one solid fabric, not a double layered mask. Would those be okay to use or not at all?
I did a quick Google. I appreciate how specific this question was. It was actually really helpful. And they're actually 3 layers in a single ply. So they're okay because there's multiple layers in there somehow. So I think it looks like they are good to go.
Excellent. Excellent. And Sarah, I appreciate that your concern and frustration. And I just want you to know that that the best that we can do is ask staff anonymously, which is what we did. And 88% of our staff said that they were planning to be vaccinated, and we've arranged for all of them to be vaccinated who wanted to be vaccinated, and we're confident that they took advantage of that. So we're feeling like we're in good shape there. You're welcome, Jen. And yeah, Sarah, yeah, I know that it's really, really difficult online like they do. They don't talk online together the same way that as they do in person. Yeah. And you can see it, you know, you can even see it in the Zoom fatigue. You can see Zoom fatigue right now in our meeting. So when we first started these parent meetings, everybody's cameras were on all the time. And the kids are feeling that same way. They're exhausted. They're tired of just being on the computer all the time. We recognize that. We are working really hard to get them into schools in as safe way as possible and quickly. And so as things change, we will continue to adapt and adjust. And that's why when the governor came out and made her statement, that was one signal for us that she has increased confidence in the trajectory that we are on as a state, and that we are on locally in Lynn and Benton counties of seeing reduced cases, which afforded us the option to have quick conversations about more quickly moving K through 8, well, 3 through 8, into their in-person schedule. Where we really will see a change, that the next level of change that would feel different, I think, for parents and students will be those changes around square feet per student. And we'll see when we hear those.
So, Sarah, thank you. Appreciate it. Mixed messages. And we deserve answers to basic questions. And I would say, what are those basic questions? I would love to answer them if you don't feel like they're answered. Danielle says, I appreciate this, Danielle. I don't show my camera because these meetings remind me of how much my kids have lost in the last year. It's heartbreaking, and I can't always control my emotions. We live the best to the best of our ability, and the schools are doing great, but it's still hard to see how much the kids have lost. Absolutely. I think we all feel that.
We, you know, we've come to the end of our hour, and this is a hard way to end the conversation, but March 13th, which is Saturday, will mark 1 year since our students have been in the classrooms. And I want our kids in the classrooms. That's where they should be. I know that our students have experienced loneliness and fear, a great deal of fear, and have worried about the unknown and what might be coming. And part of what, as we've been thinking about, as this week, we've been thinking back over the course of the last year, part of what we as staff in schools remember is the month-to-month feelings of, well, gosh, we're just going to shut down. Remember, we shut down for norovirus, and that was a really big deal. 2 Novembers ago, that was a really big deal. And so when we shut down for coronavirus at that point in time, really, we thought maybe we'll be down for 2 weeks, that there was just going to be an interruption of service, shut everything down for 2 weeks, and then people could go back to normal. And then what we saw month to month was really significant changes, both in what we were being told about the science and in what the expectations were around lockdowns or having people in the same space, or now everyone's wearing masks. And I think all of that certainly has, I believe, for you as families, felt pretty frustrating. And I don't like to have to come to you kind of on a regular basis and tell you how something new has shifted. And for a long time, all of those new conversations weren't positive. They were lengthening the time that your kids were going to be out of school. They were saying the new restrictions. They were talking about how much harder it was going to be. They were talking about, oh, we thought we'd be back in October. Nope, now maybe December. Nope, now maybe January. Nope, now. So we know our kids are coming back. We made an agreement with the union so we could set a date regardless of what the county metrics looked like. So even if, God forbid, we were in the red zone the day after spring break, we knew we were going to be able to bring our elementary students back on March 29th. That was really important to us. And so we are thrilled that we're able to do that. And we're seeing that it's a lot safer for our kids right now too. We really anticipate there's going to be a lot more freedoms that are happening, a lot more flexibility, and that too will bring change and the pain of change. But what I hope you can embrace with us is that we anticipate that will be embracing the positive change, that is we are going to start stepping into a greater sense of normalcy and into all of those opportunities that we want for our kids. So thank you for riding through this with us. We appreciate how difficult it is. I appreciate that the news that I share with you is not necessarily the news that you always want to hear. And I appreciate all of you who show up to these meetings and just ask those hard questions and keep pressing. It's important for me to hear, and it's certainly important for the staff to hear as well. So thank you for being here. Have a really good evening. We will let you know as things change, promise you. And if we see a dramatic change, we'll try and schedule another forum, okay? So thanks a lot. Have a good night, everybody. Goodbye. Thank you, staff, for being here very much. Appreciate it.